I'm Alex Hirsch, creator of Gravity Falls and voice of Too Many Characters.
Hey, my name is Mike Rianda. I was the creative director on the show.
And this is the second episode of Gravity Falls, and actually the first episode we wrote.
Yeah, it was insane to try to figure out.
So
this was like the hardest thing either of us had ever done.
So just to give you listeners context, me and Mike, we were buddies. We both went to the same college. We didn't know each other back then, but we met on this show, and we had never written anything in our lives before we wrote this episode of television.
Yeah, this might not sound like anything, but we wrote the entire episode in Microsoft Word, and we were really indignant that people are like, "Oh, I want to read it in Final Draft." And we're like, "That's crazy. We're geniuses. You should read it the way we write it."
We had no idea what we were doing. We were like, I was probably writing my sections in text edit. Mike was writing his in Microsoft Word. We were trying to teach ourselves how to write a television show while we had the whole thing greenlit, 20 episodes greenlit, announcements, a budget, a massive team of people working under us.
Yeah.
We were we probably wrote this episode how many times?
There were 8 different episodes, including 8 different versions, including one where they were on a party boat, and there was a guy who played a steel drum who was a major part of the episode named Willie J or something like that.
Yeah, Willie B, the Caribbean beats of Willie B was an important part of just to show you guys aspiring writers, if idiots like us could eventually muddle through the process of learning how to indent script properly and also how to write a story and introduce you to characters. We kind of talked over it, but I want to bring up something that just happened on screen there. There was 2 scenes back to back that sort of exemplified me and Mike's different perspective on what we bring to the table in terms of writing.
Yeah.
So that episode opened up with the characters having a syrup race.
Yeah.
Which isn't a thing that exists in real life. And it has no plot relevance, but it was... I remember Mike reading versions of the script and saying, "Why do I like these kids?"
Yeah.
What was the perspective behind the syrup race?
Yeah, well, the whole thing is we wanted to build... Because this is the first episode that we wrote, so we wanted to make Dipper and Mabel sell these characters they like each other, they're fun to watch, don't you like them? Hey, why would you care about their adventures?
Making them friends, establishing that they were friends, that's something that every script you would look at and you'd be like, I need a moment where I like the kids, where they're enjoying each other's company, where they're doing just little kid fun things that make them alive and that aren't just plot setup. And then immediately following that, you've got a line where Mabel's referencing the beard hair from the gnomes in the previous episode, because that's what I was obsessed with.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with, can I force continuity in things? So, that cold open has 2 things in a row that have no relevance to the plot. First, the syrup race, just to show that they're friendly kids who like each other. Then the reference to the beard hair, so that I could show my continuity. And then the setup for the idea of the fishing, this photo contest.
Totally. And we love that was one of the big things that we got excited about when we were making the show, is that just having a comedic show with continuity at the same time. That's why it was important to show on the very second episode that hey, remember that episode you watched last week? It matters, and it really happened in this world.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations about how can we make a cartoon show that rewards your attention.
Yeah.
That doesn't just throw out. So, speaking of which, we just saw Blendon in the background.
Yeah.
We were obsessed with that kind of thing. Old Man McGucket.
Yeah, there he is.
This is his first appearance in the series. I think he was originally named Crazy Larry.
Yeah, he was named Crazy Larry.
And we got some, honestly, probably correct comment from the standards department being crazy's not a good word to use. It's kind of an old school, it's not super sensitive. So we instead made this character. It's a very sensitive character. I think I briefly wanted to call him Old Man MacGuffin because MacGuffin is a writing term meaning a plot device that starts the plot that has no actual relevance to it.
Yeah.
But I heard some other show had done that joke before, so it went from Crazy Larry to Old Man MacGuffin to Old Man McGucket, and that's about as much thought as we put into that guy.
Also, on screen, there were some caricatures of some artists, Phil Rianda and Ian Worrell and Sean Jimenez.
Oh, yeah.
Fun
Three of those fishermen, for our amusement, are caricatures of people we know. Not amusing to you.
Yeah.
Not a joke for you, but for us, a good time. So yeah, I mean, basically with this episode, sort of my broad goal was I wanted to create an episode that was sort of a nice balance between a sort of mystery adventure and getting to know these characters. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like in television, your job for particularly like the first like 5 or 10 episodes of a season is just make you love the characters.
Yeah.
Sell these characters. Give an opportunity for Dipper to be his Dipperiest, Mabel to be her Mabeliest, Stan to be a real piece of work, and hopefully to have them bond by the end of the episode. Like, I remember when we finished this episode, which we did like 100 drafts of, we weren't like crazy about it.
Yeah.
We sort of felt like, oh, it's, the mystery wasn't, it's kind of a little Scooby-Doo-esque. And it's not super deep or challenging.
Well, and people were really bummed out that the lake monster wasn't real, and also like we had this like big head of steam, which is like we're gonna make the greatest animated show of all time, and it's like this episode turned out well, and I like it, and I'm proud of a lot of stuff about it. But it's like I feel like we weren't quite getting the thing we were reaching for. I feel like we got closer later.
Tone was a big question for us when we started this show because we didn't know is it going to be a spooky, serious mystery? Is it just going to be totally jokey? Like, we wanted something in between, and this episode kind of, I think, we felt watching it, maybe it wasn't as mysterious or as grounded as we would have liked the series to be at its best. But, like, going back and, like, rewatching it, like, it's fun.
Yeah, I like a lot of the jokes.
A lot of good Mabel gags.
Yeah.
Like, this is the first episode we wrote and animated in television. The airing episode, the order that the episodes air in isn't always the same as the order they're produced in.
Yeah.
Disney told us that we had a 7-episode lead before our first episode aired, so we could do them in whatever order we wanted. And we wanted the first episode to be this because it seemed kind of like a simple way to start the show.
Yeah, and it was one of the episodes that was like the outline was in good shape, and it seemed like, oh, this will be an easy one. And no episodes are ever easy.
This scene here, this sequence with camera trouble, this was inspired by my memories of I grew up in the 90s. I'm a million years old. And we used to not be able to take photos with our phones.
Yeah.
I had to buy an actual disposable camera, and then I had to go get it developed. And so I believed in elementary school, legitimately in 3rd grade, I legitimately believed in leprechauns. I went around searching for them. I had multiple disposable cameras trying to take photos of them. So this show is, referencing those memories. And this scene, I remember writing this scene very well.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if I knew how to write television. And when I was writing this scene, I felt like, oh, this is actually funny. I think I could do this.
Yeah. Well, and this was one of the first scenes that we figured out, Dipper's, personality, that, oh, he's the crazy, overprepared straight man surrounded by Mabel and Seuss, who are a combination of screwing with him and screwing up themselves or whatever. And he's, just getting progressively more angry because his super overcomplicated plan isn't working.
Yeah, well, sort of straight man protagonists, they are really hard to write because every other character has a comedic hook.
Yeah.
Right? We understand that, Seuss is kind of this weirdo. His brain is in another place. Mabel has this exuberance and sees the best in every situation, is very creative. Stan's a crooked con man. Dipper is the normal guy. And a character like that can often start to feel like they don't have agency, start to feel just reactive.
Yeah.
And trying to find a funny take on that was very difficult, and it was something that I think caused me and Mike a massive amount of consternation in season 1.
Well, and we'd come up with crazy things like, maybe Dipper maybe he's a nerd and he likes anime, or maybe he's adventure kid and he's cool and gets into, he's wears an Indiana Jones hat and he just runs into every adventure,
we were having a hard time figuring out how do we make normal funny?
Yeah.
And this idea of him being sort of over-prepared, it's good to make a character creative if you can. Even characters that are villainous, you love characters who are kind of bringing something inventive to the scene. And so the idea that he's creatively boring, creatively prepared, I think that added a useful dimension, but it was something that we struggled with in these early shows.
Yeah, totally. And also there's just a lot of good work. We were so pumped when this episode came back because it was the first time we'd seen any animation.
And when Mike says come back, just so that you guys know that the process is we write it, we board it, we ship the storyboards to Korea, and then they come back several months later, and we watch the episode for the first time, and we have no idea how it's going to turn out. It's like shipping blueprints to another country and then them mailing you back a house.
Yeah.
And now you're living in it, and you're like, I hope the door isn't on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And then we saw what great work they did, and we were pretty excited.
Yeah, the team did a great job on this episode.
One of the hard things, there's a few terms that would sort of crop up. Me and Mike and the writers kind of had our own lingo in the writers' room, and one of the phrases, like the description of a disease of a boring protagonist is protagonitis. Oh, okay, our protagonist has come down with a lethal case of protagonitis.
Yeah,
they're
where
not boring.
Like,
they're not interesting.
I want to go to the store. And that's like the whole episode.
And then also Act 2 syndrome was a phrase we would use a lot to describe an episode where we have an opening, we have a great turn at the end of the episode, and we have no idea what to do in the middle of the episode.
Yeah.
So that's why this entire second act is vamping.
Yeah.
You'll notice that basically nothing happens in Act 2 of this story. Stan is just going around harassing children. Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss are goofing their way from point A to point B to basically fill time.
Well, this is before we figured it out. We're working our way through it. Like, maybe if we have really good jokes, we don't need a story.
That was sort of, I mean, we did much more complicated versions of this episode, but those also didn't work, so we settled on a simpler story that we made crazy via moments like this. Where did this gag come from?
This is Tyler Chen added this joke that the two fantasies would combine, and that Mabel has been in the ball for like 2 years and flies are gathering. It's hilarious.
That's something where, like, even though our show is script based, like if a board artist suggested something, or one of the artists like had a new gag or a new idea and we liked it, we would keep it in.
Yeah, and that worked with the story, because sometimes you'll have hilarious jokes that are just like, oh, this is awesome, but it has nothing to do with the rest of the story.
I'm noticing that the question mark on Seuss's shirt has inexplicably disappeared for this episode. That's an animation error we just never caught. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody. I do see a lot of people online like, did you notice that Dipper's ear is the wrong color for a frame? But I've never seen anyone point out, so you screwed up. The kid out there listening who really cares about those mistakes, you didn't catch it. This is the beginning of a lot of subtitle jokes. So we basically, like, part of my philosophy of the series was I wanted every episode to have some kind of monster, some kind of creature, or magic weirdness. But it was really important to me that it was never just a direct rip of a monster that already exists.
Yeah.
So
totally.
you couldn't just we never did a Bigfoot episode.
Yeah.
It was very important to me that you can't just, in Gravity Falls, you don't have a Sasquatch, you have a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Even if it's as dumb as this monster is called a Gobblewonker. Like, I couldn't just call it a lake monster or the Loch Ness monster, whatever. Like, it was better to me to give it a nonsense name that at least was unique to Google than to just refer to it as something we've seen in another show. There's never an episode that's just vampires.
Yeah.
Like, that was very important to me. In retrospect, I'm not sure how important it was. But
well,
at the time,
it forced us to come up with like the idea that was like 2 or 3 steps weirder than vampires, which led to some like good memorable episodes and stuff.
Yeah, this entire section, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Like, the use of the fog, it's pretty creepy. And Rough Draft, who did our animation, like, they really knocked us out with like the CG boat and the amount of splashing and rotating. Because again, I mentioned before that this episode is a very thin plot. There's not a lot of turns or plot points, so there's a lot of vamping.
Yeah.
So Act 2 is basically just them like walking, sailing, and goofing around, and then Act 3 is almost entirely a chase.
Yeah.
An unbelievably long chase. And they did such a beautiful job animating it.
Totally. Yeah, and the board team did a great job. And it was like John Aoshima, Tyler Chen, others. There are others.
This was also
Eric,
a weird
maybe.
episode
Eric
because
Tom.
it was episode 2, and we spend a huge amount of time with Seuss, a character who was barely even introduced in the first episode.
Yeah, we didn't even know if he was going to be in the show even. And this was like the testing ground. Like, what does this character work? Does he make any sense?
Anybody out there who loves Seuss, thank Michael Rianda right here, because like like I came up with this character inspired by my friend Jesus from college.
Yeah.
But I remember first showing Mike the like original Bible of the series and being like, I think Grunkle Stan needs like a sweet, lovable kind of hench idiot. And does that work? Does this work? And a couple people I'd show the show to, they didn't really get Seuss.
Yeah.
And Mike immediately got Seuss.
Yeah.
And said this character has to be in the show.
I wrote on the Bible, I wrote a giant star in Sharpie over the page, and it's like, keep this no matter what. Because he was hilarious to me. Because he's so specific. And when we met the actual Jesus Chambreau that it was based on, he is exactly that guy, and he's exactly as delightful as the real Seuss.
I really enjoyed another thing I did consciously in these early episodes was try to do things that were as disparate from the canonical current Disney television brand as possible, and having cute kids tell their grandpa they love him and having Stan go, boo, no, I hate this. Like, I like the idea that Stan would hate it if the show started to veer into saccharine territory.
Yeah, totally. That was like a great addition on a joke that was in the script that Alex just came up with, where he was just like, this is too sweet.
This, let's see. I think all the stuff with Manly Dan and punching, that was yours, Mike, right?
I wanted Manly Dan to hold up a fish to his child and say, punch it in the face, son. Yes. Now humiliate the fish. And then we got a letter from Standard saying, Manly Dan cannot punch the fish. In addition, we do not find this joke funny.
They were upset about the idea of humiliating a fish, so it's punched off camera. That insane glass joke, by the way, that comes from one of our board artists, Eric Fountain.
Yeah.
We laughed so hard when he pitched the idea of doing the standard car chase glass joke. That was just for us. We didn't know if anyone else would think that was funny, but we basically came to the team and said, we need to fill time.
Yeah.
What can happen during this chase?
This like location, like under the falls, we like had a lot of big plans for, like, oh, maybe, this is where some of the secrets of Gravity Falls are, but then we never go back to it ever. It shows you, like, we had somewhat of a plan, but not a total plan.
Yeah, I mean, we had a loose, broad continuity of the series that was always evolving on an episode-per-episode basis. Because, I mean, as we described a minute ago, you don't know what these shows are until you write them. And all we knew about this episode was when we began, the original title was Fishing Episode.
Yeah.
And we were like, it would be nice if the kids bonded with Stan. It would be nice to have a Lake Monster episode because I was obsessed with the Loch Ness Monster as a kid. Beyond that, we wrote 8 different versions. We didn't know what we invented Old Man McGucket for the purpose of this story, and then realized he could be more useful later. So it's like, you have a broad idea, but you are constantly adjusting as you discover on an episode-per-episode basis what the series is.
Yeah, because, originally Old Man McGucket was just this one-off crazy prospector guy.
Yeah, we didn't. There was, I hate to spoil the illusion for anyone who wants to believe we're geniuses, but there was no backstory that we had in mind for this character. We didn't know that he was going to be, Ford's apprentice or, have all these memory issues. He was basically just a riff off of 50s hillbilly stereotypes, an excuse for me to scream. And then as we moved into season 2, we started asking ourselves, can we take the things we started with and breathe more life and depth into them? Totally. Is there room for that? In retrospect, it seems a bit contrived. That was me and Mike sort of hanging a lampshade on our own Scooby-Doo ending and wondering, like, are we allowed to do something that's a little tropey like this?
Yeah, totally.
Like to us, what excused this trope was the fact that it was going to lead us into this sweet moment with Stan and Mabel having this realization about Stan actually wanting to bond with them. Like, that's how we excused it that way, and also by having him go insane here.
Yeah. It was super funny to us that he solved all of his problems by creating crazy robots.
This was all from Mike. Mike suggesting him building a shame bot.
And to me, I was like, this is going to be A+, unforgettable comedy, and I haven't thought about it since the episode.
I do remember pitching this episode to some of the higher-ups at the channel, and we got the feedback, we love Old Man McGucket. We expect him to be the standout character of the show.
Really?
Yeah. And just like, no one really cared.
Yeah, exactly.
Same with the barfing gnome. everyone's like, this barfing gnome's going to be the most important part of the series. And it became part of every promo and every merchandise. And fans are like, why is there a barfing gnome plush and not a Dipper plush? I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
Why is there a Halloween mask with the barfing gnome?
I like suggesting that Stan has been arrested and has an ankle bracelet now, and he's no longer allowed to leave a certain perimeter.
We don't know why.
We tried to fill these early shows with as many references to Stan being in jail as possible. We were really trying to fight against the impression that this was just a regular, safe, young show.
Yeah.
And suggest that if you paid attention, you'd constantly get hints about just how messed up Stan was.
Yeah. Well, and it was also, because it's like we were trying to make it as much for adults and ourselves as we were for kids. Kind of more so. We were just trying to make ourselves laugh.
Yeah, we never, ever, at any point throughout the entire series asked, would this make sense to kids or would kids like it?
Yeah.
We asked ourselves, is this funny to us?
Yeah. Do our friends like it?
Do you care about the characters?
Yeah.
And
team like
it? Can we pay off some of these experiments in TV that we haven't seen before? Because most of this was just an experiment of, I'd like to see a show like this. I haven't really seen it.
Yeah.
Will it work? Do you remember where this dumb pelican joke came from?
I do remember that this is your voice doing Mabel.
Yeah, this is something where it was my scratch doing this dumb voice, and then somehow it ended up staying in. We were kind of flying by the seat of our pants at the time.